She stood there in the courtroom, her voice barely above a whisper, yet every word cut through the silence like a blade. For 13 years, Britney Spears had been silenced, controlled, and stripped of her most basic human rights. But on this day, something was different. The woman who had been portrayed as unstable and erratic was about to deliver the most powerful 23 minutes of testimony the world had ever heard. The conservatorship had begun in 2008, sold to the public as protection for a troubled star. Behind closed doors, it became something far more sinister. Jamie Spears, her father, had been granted complete control over every aspect of her life. She could not drive her car, choose her medication, or even have a say in her own reproductive choices. The pop princess who had commanded stages worldwide was reduced to a prisoner in her own life. But what happened next was truly shocking. While the media painted her as someone who needed saving, Britney was quietly gathering her strength. She began documenting everything. Every forced medication, every denied request, every moment her basic dignity was stripped away. She was not the broken woman they claimed she was. She was a strategist waiting for her moment. The system seemed impenetrable. Lawyers, judges, and family members all benefited from keeping her trapped. They spoke loudly about her best interests while pocketing millions from her earnings. They appeared confident, theatrical even, in their public statements about protecting her. But they had not counted on one thing: Britney's quiet determination to expose the truth. And this is where everything changed. In 2019, she did something no one expected. She stopped performing. The woman who had been forced to work relentlessly for over a decade simply refused to continue. It was not a breakdown, as they tried to claim. It was a calculated act of resistance. She understood that her silence on stage would speak louder than any words. The conservatorship machine tried to spin this too, claiming she needed more help, more control. But cracks were beginning to show. Fans began to notice inconsistencies in the official narrative. The Free Britney movement was not born from conspiracy theories, but from careful observation of facts that did not add up. Supporters began connecting dots that powerful people hoped would remain hidden. Then came her secret weapon, Matthew Rosengart. This was not just any lawyer. He was someone who specialized in dismantling exactly the kind of system that had imprisoned her. While her previous court-appointed attorneys had seemed to work against her interests, Rosengart brought something different: genuine advocacy and a refusal to be intimidated by the powerful figures who had controlled her narrative for so long. You have not heard the most surprising part yet. When Britney finally spoke in court, she did not scream or break down as her detractors had predicted. Instead, she methodically presented facts. She spoke about being forced to take lithium against her will, about being denied the right to marry or have children, about working while running a fever of 104 degrees. Each revelation was delivered with calm precision that cut through years of manipulation. The contrast was striking. On one side stood Jamie Spears and his legal team, loud in their justifications, theatrical in their claims about protection and love. On the other side stood Britney, speaking quietly but with devastating accuracy about the reality of her imprisonment. The truth, presented simply and directly, proved more powerful than all their elaborate defenses. The judge, who had overseen this system for years, suddenly found herself facing uncomfortable questions. How had she allowed a woman who could perform complex choreography and generate millions in revenue to be declared incapable of choosing her own birth control? The inconsistencies that had been ignored for over a decade could no longer be dismissed. But the most powerful moment came when Britney revealed the psychological impact of the conservatorship. She explained how it had stripped her of her womanhood, turned her into a performing entity rather than a human being. These were not the words of someone who lacked capacity. These were the observations of someone who had been systematically dehumanized and had found the strength to name exactly what had been done to her. The end came swiftly after that. In November 2021, the conservatorship was terminated. But the real victory was not just legal freedom. It was the way Britney had reclaimed her narrative through the simple act telling the truth. She had shown that sometimes the most powerful weapon against institutional oppression is not anger or violence, but calm, persistent honesty. Today, Britney Spears continues to rebuild her life on her own terms. Her memoir, The Woman in Me, became a bestseller, giving her the platform to tell her story completely. She had transformed from a controlled performer into a free woman who had exposed a system that had failed not just her, but potentially countless others trapped in similar circumstances. The woman who was once dismissed as unstable had proven to be the sanest person in the room. She had waited, planned, and struck at exactly the right moment with the most devastating weapon of all, the unvarnished truth. And in doing so, she had not just won her freedom, she had changed the conversation about conservatorship abuse forever.